The morning sun peeked through the blinds as James Miller sipped his coffee at the kitchen table. His laptop was open in front of him, the screen filled with information about international child welfare. It wasn't how he planned to spend his Saturday, but as the head of the community outreach committee at his architecture firm, he needed to research worthy causes for their yearly donation drive. James ran his hand through his graying hair and glanced at the clock. His son Alex would be up soon, wanting breakfast before soccer practice. At 42, James had settled into the rhythm of single fatherhood. It had been 5 years since he lost his wife Lily to cancer, and though the pain had dulled, her absence still hung in the quiet corners of their Boston suburban home. He scrolled through another page of information when something caught his eye. It wasn't on the official charity website he'd been browsing, but a sketchy-looking link that had somehow appeared in the related searches. The poorly translated headline read, "Twin girls need new family." Good price for right home, James frowned. He knew he should close the tab immediately. This was clearly something shady, possibly illegal. Instead, his cursor hovered over the link. As an architect, he'd developed a keen eye for detail, and something about the thumbnail image of two identical little girls with solemn expressions tugged at him in a way he couldn't explain. Just a quick look, he muttered to himself, clicking through. The page that loaded made his stomach turn. There they were, two small girls with dark hair and eyes that seemed too old for their young faces. According to the broken English description, they were 8 years old, and their stepmother was arranging their placement for a fee. The listing included contact information and a location somewhere in Eastern Europe. "Dad, what are you looking at?" James jumped, quickly minimizing the window as Alex shuffled into the kitchen, still in his pajamas, his hair sticking up in all directions. "Just some work stuff, buddy. Ready for some pancakes?" But even as he mixed batter and flipped pancakes, his mind kept returning to those two little faces. After dropping Alex off at practice, James called an old college friend who now worked for an international children's rights organization. "This happens more often than you'd think," his friend Tom explained after James described what he'd found. "It falls into legal gray areas across international lines. We can report it, but honestly, by the time anyone investigates, those kids will likely be gone." "Gone where?" James asked, gripping his phone tighter. "Best case? An unofficial adoption to a family that couldn't qualify through proper channels. Worst case..." Tom didn't finish the sentence. That night, after tucking Alex in, James returned to his computer. He couldn't stop thinking about those girls. Something about their eyes reminded him of Lily, the same resilient spirit she'd shown even in her final days. He found himself opening the page again, staring at their photo. 3 days later, James sat in his office, unable to focus on the blueprints spread across his desk. He'd reported the listing to every relevant authority he could find, but Tom's words echoed in his mind. By the time anyone investigated, those girls would be gone. He picked up a framed photo from his desk, Lily holding a toddler Alex, both of them laughing at the camera. "What would you do?" he whispered to her image. That evening, he asked his neighbor Beth if she could watch Alex for a few days. "There's an emergency project overseas," he explained. "A children's hospital that needs redesigning after some structural damage." Beth agreed readily. She had been a godsend since Lily's death, stepping in whenever James needed help with Alex. As he packed a small suitcase, James tried to make sense of what he was doing. He wasn't planning to do anything rash. He just wanted to see the situation for himself. Maybe alert local authorities who could actually do something. He told himself he only wanted to ensure the girls found a proper home, not that he was considering anything more. The flight to Eastern Europe was long, giving James plenty of time to second-guess himself. What was he thinking, flying halfway across the world based on a suspicious online listing? He was an architect from Boston, not some international rescue worker. He had a son to think about, a business to run, but every time doubts crept in, those solemn eyes haunted him. He landed in a country he'd never visited before, where he didn't speak the language and knew no one. The translator app on his phone became his lifeline as he navigated from the capital city to a smaller, regional bus that would take him closer to the village. Listed in the ad, the landscape. Outside the bus window grew increasingly rural. Farms gave way to thick forests, occasionally broken by small clusters of houses. The bus rattled along winding roads, stopping in tiny villages where passengers got on and off, giving James curious glances. By the time he reached his destination, the sun was setting. The village was little more than a main street with a few side roads branching off like tributaries. Buildings with peeling paint lined the street, a small grocery store, what appeared to be a bar, and a handful of other businesses with signs he couldn't read. James checked into the only guest house in town, a small building with 4 rooms above a cafe. The elderly owner spoke no English but nodded at the address James showed her on his phone. "Tomorrow," she said, one of the few words they shared. "Not safe night." In his small room with its sagging bed and faded wallpaper, James stared at the ceiling fan slowly turning overhead. What exactly was his plan here? He couldn't just knock on a door and ask to see the twins. What if this was all some scam? Or worse, what if it was real? Sleep came fitfully, dreams of Lily intermingling with images of those twin girls. In one dream, Lily was trying to tell him something important, but he couldn't hear her voice over the sound of children crying. Morning brought no clarity, but James was determined to at least see the place. The address from the listing led him to the outskirts of the village, where houses grew more spread out and the road turned from pavement to dirt. The house itself was small and shabby, with a rusted metal roof and windows so dirty they were almost opaque. A scraggly garden stretched to one side, and chickens pecked in the yard. It looked ordinary enough, which somehow made the whole situation more disturbing. James stood across the road, pretending to check his phone while he observed the house. After about 20 minutes, the front door opened and a woman emerged. She was middle-aged, with hair pulled back severely from her face. She shouted something toward the house, and then they appeared, the twins from the photo. They looked even smaller in person, dressed in clothes that hung loose on their thin frames. Their dark hair was pulled back in identical ponytails, and they moved with the careful precision of children used to staying out of the way. The woman pointed to the garden, and without a word, the girls began pulling weeds. The scene looked mundane on the surface, just a woman and 2 children doing yard work. But James could see how the girls flinched when the woman raised her hand to point, how they kept their eyes down, moving with the quiet efficiency of children who'd learned that being noticed brought nothing good. As he watched, a car pulled up to the house, an expensive model that looked wildly out of place in this rural setting. A well-dressed man got out and approached the woman. They spoke, occasionally glancing at the twins who continued working as if they didn't notice the adults discussing them. James felt sick. Was he witnessing the very transaction the listing had advertised? He took out his phone and began recording discreetly, though he wasn't sure what he could do with the footage. The man eventually left, but not before handing the woman an envelope. As the car pulled away, the woman counted something inside the envelope, a smile spreading across her face. That was enough. James walked back to the village center and found someone who spoke enough English to direct him to the local police station. But his attempts to explain the situation were met with indifference. The officer shrugged and said something that the translation app rendered as family business. Not crime to send children to better home. James spent the rest of the day making calls, to his friend Tom, to international organizations, to the American embassy in the capital. Most promised to look into it, but warned him that without clear evidence of abuse or trafficking, there was little they could do immediately. That night, James paced his small room, torn between heading home to his own son and staying to help these girls he didn't even know. The responsible thing would be to leave this to the proper authorities. He had responsibilities back home, a son who needed him, a business with employees depending on him. But when he closed his eyes, he saw those twins working silently in the garden, flinching at sudden movements. And somewhere deep inside, he heard Lily's voice, as clear as if she were standing beside him. "You found them for a reason, James. Don't turn away." By morning, James had made his decision. He couldn't leave, not yet. Not until he knew those girls would be safe. What he didn't know was that his decision would set in motion events that would change all their lives forever, leading to discoveries that would indeed shatter everything he thought he knew about his own family. The village seemed different in the daylight. James noticed details he had missed before, the way some locals looked away when he mentioned the house on the outskirts. the hushed conversations that stopped when he walked to the small cafe. There were secrets here, woven into the fabric of this community like the faded patterns on the old rugs hanging in shop windows. After another failed attempt to get help from local officials, James decided on a more direct approach. He found a young teacher at the village school who spoke decent English and agreed to translate for him. "I don't like to get involved in Anna's business," the teacher, Lena, said as they walked toward the house. "She has connections, but those girls deserve better." "Anna is the stepmother?" James asked. Lena nodded. "She married their father 3 years ago, shortly after their mother died. The girls had a small inheritance from their mother. Nothing grand, just a modest house and some land. Within months of the marriage, their father died too. Very sudden. The implication hung in the air between them, and no other family stepped in. There was talk of grandparents in another country, but Anna claimed the papers showed she had legal custody. No one questioned it. They stopped a short distance from the house. The twins were outside again, hanging laundry on a line while Anna smoked on the porch steps. "What are their names?" James asked quietly. "Sophia and Eliza," Lena replied. "They rarely speak. They were in my class briefly, but Anna pulled them out, said they were needed at home." James took a deep breath. "Okay, let's do this." They approached the house slowly. Anna straightened when she saw them coming, flicking her cigarette into the dirt. "Tell her I saw her online listing," James instructed Lena. "Say I'm interested in providing a home for the girls." Lena looked uncomfortable but translated. Anna's eyes narrowed, then lit with interest as she looked James up and down, taking in his expensive watch and well-made shoes. What followed was one of the most disturbing conversations of James's life. Through Lena, Anna spoke of the twins, as if they were furniture she was trying to unload, describing them as hard workers and not too much trouble as long as they were kept in line. She named a price that made James's stomach turn. "Ask to see their papers," he told Lena, "and ask if they have any medical records." Anna disappeared inside and returned with a folder of documents, birth certificates, what appeared to be adoption papers, and a few school records. All were in a language James couldn't read, but the dates and official stamps seemed legitimate at a glance. "Tell her I need time to think about it," James said finally. "Ask if I can return tomorrow." As they walked away, Lena was quiet. "Those papers," she finally said. "Some didn't look right to me. The stamps were old style, not what we use now." Back at the guest house, James called Tom again. "I found them," he said without preamble. "The situation is worse than I thought. The stepmother is actively trying to sell them. She has papers, but my translator thinks some might be forged." "James, you need to be careful," Tom warned. "If you're right about forged documents, you could be dealing with people involved in serious crimes. This isn't just a greedy stepmother, there could be a network." "I can't just leave them here," James said, his voice rising. "The local police won't help. The authorities you contacted haven't shown up." "What am I supposed to do?" There was a long pause. "There might be a way," Tom said reluctantly. "It's not ideal, and it would be expensive and risky, but I have contacts who help in extreme cases like this. They work within legal channels where possible, but they're creative when necessary." James closed his eyes. "Tell me." The plan that emerged over the next 24 hours was complicated and morally ambiguous. Tom's contacts included a lawyer who specialized in international family law and a social worker with experience rescuing children from dangerous situations. Together, they outlined steps that might allow James to get the twins out legally, or at least with enough official-looking documentation to get them across borders. "You're looking at significant expenses," the lawyer warned during a conference call. "Not just my fees, but expedited processing for various officials. And that's assuming the stepmother is willing to go through with it." "Money isn't the issue," James said firmly. He had savings and his business was doing well. "Just tell me what to do." The following day, James returned to Anna's house with Lena and a local man Tom's contacts had connected him with, someone with experience navigating the region's bureaucracy. For the right price, he claimed he could get almost any document processed. This time, Anna invited them inside. The house was as grim inside as out. Sparse furniture, peeling wallpaper, and a pervasive smell of cabbage and cigarettes. The twins sat in a corner, silently threading beads onto strings, making what looked like simple bracelets. They didn't look up when the adults entered. Through Lena and the local fixer, James began the grim process of negotiating for 2 young lives. Anna was shrewd, sensing James's desperation and raising her price accordingly. James countered by pointing out flaws in her paperwork that could cause problems for her. The twins continued working, giving no sign they understood what was happening. Though James caught one of them, he couldn't yet tell them apart, glancing at him when Anna wasn't looking. After 2 hours of tense back and forth, they reached an agreement. The sum was substantial, enough to drain most of James's savings, but it included all documentation and Anna's promise not to cause problems later. "Ask them if they want to come with me," James said to Lena, nodding toward the twins. Anna snorted when Lena translated, saying something sharp in response. "She says they have no choice in the matter," Lena translated uncomfortably. "She is their guardian and decides where they go." James knelt down to the twins' level, ignoring Anna's disapproving look. "My name is James," he said gently, knowing they probably didn't understand his words but hoping his tone would convey his intentions. "I want to help you." For the first time, both girls looked directly at him. Their eyes were dark and unreadable, but he thought he saw a flicker of something. Hope, perhaps, or simply curiosity. The next 3 days were a blur of offices, officials, and paperwork. James's guide navigated the process with practiced ease, knowing exactly which palms to grease and which procedures could be expedited. James tried not to think too hard about the ethics of what he was doing. These weren't normal adoption proceedings. They existed in a gray area between rescue and transaction. On the 4th day, James found himself back at Anna's house with a folder of stamped documents and a cashier's check. The twins stood by the door with small backpacks that looked nearly empty. "Is that all they have?" James asked Lena. Anna shrugged when the question was translated. "They don't need much." James handed over the check, which Anna examined carefully before nodding with satisfaction. "Tell them we're leaving now," James said to Lena. "Ask if they're ready." Lena spoke gently to the girls, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Without a word to their stepmother, they picked up their backpacks and moved to stand beside James. The lack of emotion in the parting struck James as profoundly sad. These children were being handed over to a complete stranger, and no one, not them, not the woman who had supposedly raised them for 3 years, showed any sign this was an important moment. "Let's go," he said, offering his hands to the twins. Neither took it. Instead, they followed silently as he led them to the waiting car, climbing into the back seat together with their backpacks clutched in their laps. The drive to the capital was quiet. James tried to make conversation through Lena, who had agreed to accompany them to the city, but the girls responded only in monosyllables. They sat pressed against each other, occasionally whispering words too quiet for anyone else to hear. In the city, they checked into a hotel, a real one, with clean sheets and hot water, not like the village guest house. James got a suite with 2 bedrooms so the twins could have their own space. When they entered, both girls stood in the middle of the room, looking lost. "Show them around," James suggested to Lena. "Maybe they'd like to clean up and change clothes." While Lena helped the twins, James called Alex. He had spoken to his son every day since arriving, but he had been vague about what he was doing. Now he needed to prepare Alex for the possibility of house guests. "Hey buddy, how's it going?" he asked when Alex answered. "Dad, when are you coming home? Beth made meatloaf again, and you know I hate her meatloaf." James smiled despite his exhaustion. "Soon, I hope." "Listen, Alex, there's something I need to tell you." He explained in simple terms that he had met 2 children who needed help and might be coming to stay with them for a while. He left out the more troubling details, focusing instead on how the girls had lost their parents and had no one to care for them properly. There was a long silence on the other end. "Are you adopting them?" Alex finally asked, his voice small. No, James assured him, though he wasn't entirely sure what the endgame was here. "Just helping them find a better situation. They need a safe place to stay while we figure things out." "Oh, okay." James could hear the uncertainty in his son's voice. "Alex, you're still my #1 guy. That's never going to change. But sometimes we need to help others when we can. Your mom would have wanted that." The mention of Lily seemed to settle something for Alex. "Yeah, she would have." "Okay, Dad." After hanging up, James ordered room service, a feast compared to what the twins were likely used to. But when the food arrived, both girls eyed it suspiciously and ate only small amounts, hiding bread rolls in their pockets when they thought no one was looking. That night, Lena Rhett earned to her own home, promising to come back the next day to help with translation. James set up the girls in the second bedroom, showing them the bathroom and how to work the television. They watched everything with wide, wary eyes but said almost nothing. Around midnight, James woke to a sound. He found the twins huddled together on the couch in the suite's living room, whispering urgently. They froze when they saw him. "It's okay," he said softly, keeping his distance. "You're safe here." They didn't respond, but they didn't return to their bedroom either. Eventually, James brought blankets and pillows and made up the couch for them. They accepted this arrangement, curling up together like kittens in a basket. In the morning, James woke to find them gone. Panic seized him until he spotted them sitting on the balcony, watching the sunrise over the city. They had taken the food they'd hidden the night before and were sharing it between them. It struck James then just how much trauma these girls must have endured. They didn't trust that food would keep coming. They didn't feel safe in separate beds. They spoke only to each other. What had he gotten himself into? And more importantly, what would happen next? The temporary documents he'd obtained would get them out of the country, but then what? These weren't stray puppies he could simply take home. They were children with their own history, their own language, their own wounds. For the first time since seeing that online listing, James felt the full weight of what he had done. He was now responsible for 2 traumatized children who didn't speak his language, in a foreign country where his legal standing to take them was questionable at best. He had saved them from their stepmother, yes. But now he had to figure out how to truly help them heal, and he had absolutely no idea where to begin. The flight home was tense. Sophia and Eliza sat rigidly in their seats, hands clutching the armrest during takeoff. James had managed to get them on his flight with the temporary guardianship papers, though not without some tense moments at border control. A call to Tom's lawyer friend had smoothed the way, but James couldn't shake the feeling that at any moment someone would stop them, question his right to take these children out of the country. But now they were in the air, bound for Boston, and James watched as the twins experienced their first flight with a mixture of fear and wonder. They accepted the airline meals with the same cautious approach they'd shown at the hotel, eating small bites, hiding snacks in their pockets, watching carefully to see what James did before mimicking his actions. "We'll be home soon," he told them, though he knew they didn't understand his words. He had downloaded a translation app on his phone, but their responses to his translated phrases were minimal at best. Home. The word felt strange even as he said it. His home with Alex was about to change dramatically. 2 traumatized children who spoke no English were about to enter their lives. What had seemed like a rescue mission now loomed as a monumental challenge. Beth was waiting at the airport with Alex. James had called ahead, explaining as best he could about the twins. Now, as they came through the arrival gate, he saw Alex's eyes widen as he spotted the 2 small figures walking close together behind his dad. "Hi, Dad," Alex said, his gaze fixed on the twins. "Are these them?" James nodded, placing a gentle hand on each girl's shoulder. "This is Sophia and Eliza. Girls, this is my son Alex and our neighbor Beth." The twins stared at Alex with the same wary expression they'd given everything new. Alex, to James's surprise, stepped forward and gave a small, awkward wave. "Hi," he said. Welcome to America, I guess." The drive home was quiet. Beth had brought snacks, which the twins accepted but didn't eat, tucking them away as they always did. Alex kept sneaking glances at them from the front seat. "They don't talk much, huh?" he whispered to James at one point. "They've been through a lot," James replied softly, "and they don't speak English yet. We'll need to be patient." The house looked exactly as James had left it nearly 2 weeks ago, but walking through the door with Sophia and Eliza made it feel like a different place entirely. They stood in the entryway, taking in the spacious living room, the family photos on the walls, the comfortable furniture that showed signs of daily life. "Let me show you where you'll sleep," James said, using his phone to translate. The girls followed him upstairs to the guest room, which Beth had prepared with fresh linens and a few stuffed animals she'd purchased. The twins looked at the 2 separate beds, then at each other. Without a word, they moved to the bed farthest from the door and sat on it together, their backpacks still clutched in their laps. "You can unpack," James said through the app. "This is your room now." They made no move to unpack. Instead, Sophia, at least James thought it was Sophia as he was still learning to tell them apart, said something to her sister. Eliza nodded and reached into her backpack, pulling out a small tattered photo. She held it out to James. It showed a smiling woman with the same dark hair and eyes as the twins, holding 2 toddlers in her lap. Written on the back in a language James couldn't read was what appeared to be a name and date. "Your mother?" James asked, pointing to the woman. Both girls nodded, watching his reaction closely. "She was beautiful," James said sincerely. "Like you." Eliza took the photo back carefully, returning it to her backpack. It was the first voluntary interaction either twin had initiated, and James felt a small spark of hope. That night, he made a simple dinner, watching as the twins picked at their food. Alex, after initial awkwardness, tried to engage them by showing them his handheld video game. To James's surprise, they showed interest, leaning forward to watch the screen as Alex played. When bedtime came, the twins insisted on sleeping in the same bed, just as they had at the hotel. James didn't push it. There would be time to help them feel secure enough for separate beds later. Around 2 in the morning, James woke to screams. He rushed to the guest room to find both girls thrashing in their sleep, caught in identical nightmares. He gently woke them, speaking soft words they couldn't understand but hopefully could feel the meaning behind. They sat huddled against the headboard, eyes wide with terror even after waking. James sat on the edge of the bed, not touching them but staying close, humming an old lullaby he used to sing to Alex. Eventually, their breathing slowed. Sophia said something to her sister, who nodded and reached for the water glass on the nightstand. They both drank, still watching James as if unsure what he would do next. "It's okay," he said, even though they couldn't understand. "You're safe now." He stayed until they fell back asleep, curled toward each other like commas in a sentence only they could read. The next morning, Alex appeared in the kitchen while James was making breakfast. The twins had not yet come downstairs. "They were screaming last night," Alex said, sliding onto a stool at the counter. "They had nightmares," James explained. "It's going to happen sometimes." Alex was quiet for a moment, watching James flip pancakes. "What happened to them, Dad?" "I mean, really?" James sighed, considering how much to share. "They lost their parents. Their stepmother wasn't kind to them. They've probably never felt completely safe." "Like she hit them?" Alex asked, his eyes wide. "Maybe. But sometimes hurting someone doesn't require hitting them. Sometimes it's about not giving them enough food or making them feel worthless or using them for work instead of letting them be children." Alex looked down at his hands. "That's really messed up." "Yes, it is," James agreed. "Which is why we need to be extra kind and patient even when it's hard. Even when they don't seem to appreciate it." "Okay," Alex nodded solemnly. "I can do that." When the twins finally came downstairs, they moved cautiously as if expecting a trap. James set plates of pancakes on the table, motioning for them to sit. Alex, in a gesture that made James's heart swell, pushed the maple syrup toward them, demonstrating how to pour it. "Like this," he said, drizzling syrup over his own pancakes. "It's really good." The twins watched, then carefully mimicked his actions. When they tasted the sweet syrup, their eyes widened slightly, the first sign of childlike pleasure James had seen from them. The days that followed fell into a pattern. James took time off work to stay home with the twins, arranging for an interpreter to come several times a week. He found a therapist who specialized in traumatized children and had experience with international cases. He consulted with lawyers about more permanent guardianship options. The twins remained mostly silent, speaking only to each other in whispers. But small changes began to appear. They stopped hiding food after the first week, seeming to accept that meals would come regularly. They began to explore the house when they thought no one was watching, touching furniture and examining photos with curious fingers. And, most significantly, they began to interact with Alex. It started with the video games. Alex, in an attempt to bridge the language gap, showed them how to play simple games on his console. The twins were fascinated, especially by games involving exploration or building. They would sit for hours, Sophia controlling the character while Eliza pointed out things to investigate on screen. Alex, showing unexpected patience, taught them English words associated with the games. "Jump," he would say, demonstrating the button. "Run, stop, look." The twins began to repeat these words, their accents heavy but recognizable. One afternoon, James came into the living room to find all three children on the floor surrounded by Alex's Lego collection. Alex was building some sort of structure, explaining in simple English what he was doing. The twins were copying him, their small hands carefully selecting pieces that matched his. "That's good," Alex said, as Eliza placed a block correctly. "Nice job." Eliza looked up, the ghost of a smile touching her lips before disappearing. It was progress, James thought. Slow but real. The nightmares continued, though. Most nights, one or both twins would wake screaming, images from their past intruding on their sleep. James would sit with them, sometimes reading aloud from children's books, his voice a steady anchor until they drifted off again. During their sessions with the therapist, the twins began to draw pictures, dark, troubling images of a woman with sharp teeth, of two small figures huddled in what looked like a cupboard, of hands reaching out but finding nothing to grasp. "They're processing their trauma," the therapist explained to James. "It will take time, but drawing helps them express what they can't yet say in words." The interpreter, working with the therapist, began to piece together fragments of the twins' story. Their mother had died when they were 5. Medicine that made her sleep and not wake up, they said, which the therapist suspected meant some form of poisoning. Their father had remarried quickly, bringing Anna into their lives. After their father's death, another suspicious accident. Anna had begun using the twins as free labor, first around the house, then sending them to work for others. "They say they were separated once," the interpreter explained after one session, "sent to different houses to work. But they found each other and ran away." "How?" James asked, amazed that 2 young children could manage such a thing. The interpreter asked, then translated their answer. "We always find each other. We're 2 halves." The bond between the twins was unlike anything James had ever seen. They seemed to communicate without words sometimes, a look or gesture conveying complex meanings. They slept holding hands, ate the same foods in the same order, moved through the house like 2 shadows merged at the edges. 1 month after bringing the twins home, James enrolled them in English language classes at the local community center. The instructor, a kind woman named Mrs. Chen, had experience with traumatized refugee children and created a gentle, supportive environment. "They're very bright," she told James after the first week. "They pick things up quickly, but they only speak when spoken to directly, and even then, minimally. They speak to each other," James said, "and sometimes to my son a little, but not much to adults." Mrs. Chen nodded thoughtfully. "Trust takes time, but there's something else I've noticed. When I give them writing exercises, they sometimes use letters from a different alphabet mixed in with English, as if they learned another language first before whatever they speak now." "Is that unusual?" James asked. "It suggests they may have been very young when they moved from one country to another. Their primary language might not be what they currently speak." This observation added another layer of mystery to the twins' background. James had assumed they were native to the country where he'd found them, but perhaps their journey had been more complicated. The breakthrough came unexpectedly, on a warm spring day when James took the children to the park. Alex brought a kite, a colorful dragon design that swooped and dived in the wind when properly handled. "Want to try?" he asked the twins, holding out the spool of string. After a moment's hesitation, Sophia stepped forward and took it. Alex showed her how to pull and release to make the kite dance. When a sudden gust lifted the dragon kite high into the sky, Sophia let out a sound James had never heard before. A laugh, bright and surprised and thoroughly childlike. Eliza stared at her sister in shock. Then she too began to laugh. Soon all 3 children were laughing, taking turns with the kite, running across the grass with their faces tilted toward the sky. In the car on the way home, the twins fell asleep, exhausted from the day's activities. Alex looked over at them, then at James. "They're getting better, aren't they, Dad?" he asked quietly. James glanced in the rearview mirror at the sleeping girls, their faces peaceful for once. "Yes," he said, "I think they are." That night, James sat at his desk reviewing the latest update from the lawyer. The process of establishing legal guardianship was complicated, involving international agencies and mountains of paperwork. There were questions about the twins' true nationality, given the discrepancies in their documents. There were concerns about how they had come into James's care, but as he sifted through the legal jargon, James found himself thinking not of paperwork, but of Sophia's laugh in the park, of Eliza's focused expression as she built with Legos, of the way they had begun in tiny increments to relax the constant vigilance they had lived with for so long. They had a long way to go. The nightmares still came. The twins still had days when they retreated into silence, when they flinched at sudden movements or watched food being prepared with anxious eyes. They still slept in the same bed, still spoke primarily to each other in their private language of whispers and glances. But there were also new developments. English words sprinkled through their conversations. Tentative interactions with neighbors and other children. Sophia had begun helping James water the houseplants each morning. Eliza had developed a fascination with the piano in the living room, picking out simple melodies by ear. James closed the laptop and walked quietly to check on the children. Alex was asleep in his room, surrounded by books and model airplanes, one arm flung wide as if embracing his dreams. In the twins' room, he found them asleep in their usual position, facing each other, hands loosely clasped. But for once their faces showed no tension, no sign of the vigilance that normally persisted even in sleep. As he turned to leave, James noticed something on the dresser, a drawing different from the dark images they usually produced. This one showed 3 stick figures holding hands, 2 small ones with long dark hair and a taller one in the middle. Behind them was a house that looked very much like James's, and at the bottom in carefully printed letters were the words, "Our new home." It wasn't a solution to all their problems. It wasn't an end to the legal complications or the psychological challenges ahead, but it was a beginning, a fragile bridge between past and future, built word by word, smile by smile, moment by moment. And for tonight, that was enough. 6 months after bringing the twins home, James sat in his home office surrounded by paperwork. The legal process was moving forward, but slowly. His lawyer had advised him to get DNA tests for the twins, not just to confirm they were biological siblings, which was obvious to anyone who saw them, but to establish their genetic background as part of the more permanent guardianship application. It might help clarify their country of origin, the lawyer had explained. Those documents from their stepmother are questionable at best. Outside, he could hear Alex teaching the twins how to ride bikes in the driveway. Their English had improved dramatically, though they still spoke with an accent and struggled with complex phrases. They had started at a special program at the local elementary school 2 months ago. Not quite regular classes yet, but a supportive environment where they could learn at their own pace. The changes in them were remarkable. Both had gained weight, their formerly thin faces filling out into healthier roundness. Their hair, once dull and lifeless, now shone as it grew out of the severe haircuts Anna had given them. They smiled sometimes, not often but genuinely when they did. Yet challenges remained. The twins still insisted on sleeping in the same bed. They still had nightmares, though less frequently, and they remained deeply wary of most adults, especially women who reminded them in any way of their stepmother. James was pulled from his thoughts by the sound of the doorbell. He checked his watch. It was time for their weekly session with Dr. Rivera, the child psychologist who had been working with the twins. He opened the door to find the doctor waiting with her usual kind smile. In her late 50s, with salt and pepper hair and warm brown eyes, Dr. Rivera had quickly earned the twins' cautious trust through her gentle, patient approach. "How was their week?" she asked as she entered, setting down her bag of therapeutic tools, art supplies, puppets, and other items she used to help the children express what they couldn't say directly. "Better," James replied. "No nightmares since Sunday. And they've started talking more at dinner." Sophia asked for seconds yesterday without being prompted. Dr. Rivera nodded approvingly. "That's progress. Food security is often a lingering issue for children who've experienced neglect. Asking for more food shows she's beginning to truly believe it will be available." The twins and Alex came in from outside, faces flushed from exercise. When they saw Dr. Rivera, the twins didn't smile exactly, but their expressions lightened in recognition. "Hello, girls," Dr. Rivera said warmly. "I thought we might draw today. Would you like that?" The session proceeded as usual. with Dr. Rivera guiding the twins through activities designed to help them process their emotions. Today, she asked them to draw their family, a standard psychological assessment that often revealed how children viewed their place in the world. James watched from across the room as the twins bent over their papers, occasionally exchanging whispers. When they finished, Dr. Rivera invited them to explain their drawings. Eliza had drawn 4 figures in front of a house, herself, Sophia, Alex, and James all holding hands. But she'd also drawn another figure slightly apart and faded as if drawn with lighter pressure. "Who's this?" Dr. Rivera asked, pointing to the 5th figure. Eliza hesitated. "Our mother," she said softly. "From before," Dr. Rivera nodded encouragingly. "Do you remember her?" "A little," Eliza replied. "She sang to us. She smelled like flowers." Sophia's drawing was similar, but she had included more details on the mother figure. Long dark hair, a necklace with a small pendant. "She had a necklace like that," Sophia explained when asked, "with a bird on it. She said it was a nightingale," Eliza finished for her. "She said nightingales sing the most beautiful songs." James felt a pang of sadness for these children who had lost so much, not just their parents, but their sense of security, their childhood innocence. After Dr. Rivera left, promising to return the following week, James prepared dinner while the children watched a movie in the living room. As pasta sauce simmered on the stove, he thought about the twins' drawings and their fragmentary memories of their mother. They rarely spoke of their past unprompted, and James had been careful not to push. Dr. Rivera had advised letting them share at their own pace, building trust through consistency and safety rather than interrogation. But sometimes, usually when they were tired or feeling particularly secure, details would emerge. The house they had lived in before Anna came, small but with a garden full of flowers. Their father, who was often away for work but brought them little presents when he returned. Their mother, who taught them songs and told them stories about brave children who overcame obstacles. The DNA test results came back the following week. James opened the envelope in his office, expecting simple confirmation of what everyone could see: that Sophia and Eliza were identical twins, sharing the same genetic makeup. What he didn't expect was the section on genetic heritage. According to the analysis, the twins' DNA showed significant Western European ancestry, specifically, patterns consistent with British, French, and some Southern European heritage. This stood in stark contrast to the documentation from their supposed country of birth, which should have shown primarily Eastern European markers. James called the testing company to confirm there hadn't been a mix-up. No, they assured him. The samples had been carefully tracked. The results were accurate. He sat back in his chair, puzzled. If the twins weren't native to the country where he'd found them, how had they ended up there? Had their mother been a Western European who married a local man? Or was there a more complicated story? That evening, after the children were in bed, James pulled out the folder of documents he had obtained from Anna. He had had them translated months ago, but now he examined them with new eyes. The birth certificates listed the twins' birthplace as a small town he had never heard of. Their mother's name was given as Natalia Petrovich, their father's as Mikhail Petrovich. According to the dates, the twins would be turning 9 in a few months. But now, with the DNA results raising questions, James noticed other discrepancies. The paper used for the birth certificate seemed too new for documents supposedly 8 years old. The official stamps, as Lena had pointed out back in the village, were outdated styles, and the twins' supposed birth date conflicted with a vaccination record that suggested they were actually several months younger. On a hunch, James dug out an old photo album. He flipped through until he found what he was looking for: a picture of his late wife, Lily, at a family wedding. She stood next to a woman who could have been her double, both of them laughing at something off camera. Lily's sister, Eleanor. The sister Lily rarely spoke of, due to a falling out years before James met her. The sister who had moved to Europe after college and eventually stopped communicating with the family entirely. James stared at Eleanor's face, then at a recent photo of the twins he kept on his desk. The resemblance was striking. The same shaped eyes, the same high cheekbones, even the same small dimple in the left cheek when they smiled. It couldn't be. It was too incredible, too coincidental. But what if... Heart pounding, James opened his laptop and began searching. Eleanor Miller would have been in her early 30s when the twins were born. If she had married, her last name would have changed. James had no idea what country she had settled in, or if she had moved around Europe. His searches yielded nothing conclusive. Eleanor seemed to have vanished from official records after leaving the States. No marriage license, no death certificate. Nothing he could access from his computer at home. The next day, James called in a favor from a college friend who worked in international banking. "I need to trace someone who moved to Europe about 15 years ago," he explained. "My late wife's sister. It's important. It might relate to the twins I've taken in." His friend promised to see what he could find through his professional networks. A week later, he called back. "I found something," he said without preamble. And Eleanor Miller married a man named Nikolai Volkov about 12 years ago. They lived in several European countries, France, Germany, finally settling in a small town near the border of Ukraine and Romania. "Any record of children?" James asked, his throat tight. "2 daughters born 8 years ago. Twins, according to the hospital record I was able to access." James felt dizzy. "And Eleanor and her husband? Are they still there?" A pause. "I'm sorry, James. There are death certificates for both of them from 3 years ago. A car accident, according to the report." The timing matched what the twins had said about losing their parents, what Lena had told him about their mother dying and their father remarrying shortly afterward, then dying himself within months. "I need copies of everything you've found," James said. "And I need one more thing, the name of any living relatives listed for Nikolai Volkov." 2 days later, the information arrived. Nikolai Volkov had one living relative at the time of his death, a half-sister named Anna Volkova. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Anna hadn't been a random woman who married the twins' father for their modest inheritance. She was their father's half-sister, who had married him briefly to gain legal custody of the children and their property. She had systematically erased their true identities, changing their names, falsifying documents, ensuring they would never know their connection to their mother's American family. And now, through a series of choices that had seemed random at the time, the twins had found their way to their mother's sister's husband, to their uncle by marriage. James sat in shocked silence as the implications washed over him. Sophia and Eliza weren't just 2 orphaned children he had rescued on impulse. They were family. Lily's family. Alex's cousins. That evening after the twins were asleep, James showed Alex the photos of Eleanor alongside recent pictures of the twins. "They look like her," Alex said, studying the images. "And kind of like the pictures of Mom, too." "They're your cousins, Alex," James said gently. "Your mom's sister was their mother." Alex was quiet for a long moment. "So that's why you felt like you had to bring them home? Because somehow you knew?" "I didn't know," James admitted. "I just couldn't look away. Something about their eyes in that first photo I saw. Maybe some part of me recognized something familiar." "Does this mean they'll stay with us forever?" Alex asked. "Like officially? If that's what they want, and if we can make it legal, then yes." Alex nodded slowly. "Good, they belong here." James couldn't sleep that night. He kept thinking about Lily, about the sister she had loved and lost touch with. Had she known Eleanor had twins? Had she known her sister had died? There had been no mention at the funeral, no word from Europe. The estrangement had been so complete that news hadn't traveled in either direction. And now, by what seemed like impossible coincidence, Lily's nieces were sleeping in his house. Except it wasn't really coincidence, was it? Anna had been selling the twins through online channels. James had stumbled across the listing while researching child welfare for his firm's charity work. Work he had taken on after Lily's death as a way to honor her memory, since she had always been passionate about helping children. The threads of connection were there, subtle but real, not coincidence but convergence, lives moving along separate paths until circumstances brought them to an intersection point. The question now was what to do with this knowledge. Should he tell the twins immediately? They were still healing, still building trust and security in their new life. Would this revelation help or harm that process? James decided to consult Dr. Rivera first. At their next session, after the twins were occupied with an art project in the next room, he shared his discovery. "This is remarkable," Dr. Rivera said when he finished, "and it certainly explains the DNA results." "Should I tell them?" James asked. "They're just starting to feel settled," Dr. Rivera considered carefully. In my professional opinion, children benefit from knowing their true history, but timing is crucial. The twins are still processing significant trauma. Learning they have family, real biological connection to you and Alex through their mother, could be deeply healing. But it will also raise questions about their past that may be difficult to answer. Like why their mother cut ties with her family, why no one came looking for them after their parents died. Dr. Rivera nodded. Exactly. And it may trigger grief for their mother. All over again. But keeping this information from them long-term could damage the trust you've worked so hard to build. They decided on a gradual approach. James would begin by asking more about their memories of their mother, perhaps showing them photos of Lily and mentioning her sister without making the connection explicit yet. He would watch for signs they were ready for more. That weekend, James took out the family photo albums while the children were playing in the backyard. When they came in for lunch, he casually mentioned he'd found some old pictures. "Would you like to see what Alex looked like as a baby?" he asked the twins. They nodded, curious. The three children gathered around the album as James turned pages, showing Alex's early years, family vacations, holidays. Then he turned to a page with photos of Lily. "This was Alex's mom," he said softly. "My wife, Lily." The twins studied the photos intently. "She was pretty," Sophia said after a moment. "She looks like you," Eliza added, looking at Alex. "She had a sister," James said carefully, turning to the wedding photo that showed Lily and Eleanor together. They looked a lot alike. Both twins stared at the photo. A small furrow appeared between Sophia's eyebrows. "What was her name?" she asked. "Eleanor," James replied, watching their reactions closely. No spark of recognition crossed their faces. If they had known their mother's American name, they had forgotten it, or perhaps she had used a different name in her new life. "She moved to Europe," James continued. "She and Lily didn't talk much after that." "Like us," Eliza said unexpectedly. "We moved places too. I remember big buildings, then mountains, then the village." It was more than she had ever shared about their early life in one go. James gently encouraged her to continue. "Do you remember what your mother called you? Your special names just from her?" The twins exchanged looks, that silent communication passing between them. "She called me Ellie sometimes," Eliza said softly. "And Sophia was Sophie." Eleanor's nickname had been Ellie, James remembered Lily saying once. The coincidences were mounting, becoming too numerous to be chance. "My mother sang to us," Sophia volunteered suddenly. "A song about a boat on a river. Row, row, row your boat?" Alex suggested. Sophia shook her head. "No, about a river and golden dreams." James felt his heart skip. "Was it Moon River?" Both twins looked up in surprise. "Yes," they said in unison. Lily had often mentioned that Moon River was her and Eleanor's favorite song growing up. Their mother had sung it to them as a lullaby. In that moment, looking at the twins' faces as they recognized the connection, James knew the truth wouldn't wait for careful planning or perfect timing. It was already emerging piece by piece. "There's something I need to tell you," he said gently, "something I just found out myself." And as the afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across the photo albums spread on the table, James began to tell the twins about their mother's American family, about the sister she had loved but lost touch with, about the incredible journey that had brought them, against all odds, to the home of their mother's sister's husband, to the uncle they never knew they had. What he couldn't have predicted was how this revelation would upend everything yet again, bringing both healing and fresh pain as the twins began to reclaim their true identities and uncover the full story of their family's past. The living room was quiet except for the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock and the occasional rustle of papers. 3 years had passed since James first saw those solemn faces on his computer screen. 3 years of challenges, breakthroughs, setbacks, and slow, steady healing. The twins, now 11, sat cross-legged on the floor surrounded by photos, letters, and documents. Their English was nearly perfect now, though a slight accent remained, giving their speech a musical quality that James found endearing. "This one next," Sophia said, placing a photo in the leather-bound album they were creating. The picture showed Eleanor, their mother, as a teenager, arm in arm with Lily at some long-ago family picnic. "They look so happy." "Mom said they used to finish each other's sentences," Eliza added, carefully writing a caption beneath the photo, "Just like us." In the years since discovering their true connection to James and Alex, The twins had become passionate about reconstructing their family history. The album was their latest project, a visual timeline of their mother's life, from her childhood in America to her years in Europe. The legal battle to fully adopt the twins had been long and complex. Anna had eventually been located and faced charges for document fraud and child exploitation. The discovery that she had falsified the twins' identities, essentially erasing their American heritage, had added weight to James's case for adoption. 6 months ago, the adoption had finally been finalized. Sophia and Eliza were officially Millers now, though they had chosen to keep Volkov as their middle names, honoring the father who, by all accounts, had loved them dearly before his untimely death. "I found another one," Alex called from the dining room where he was sorting through a box of Lily's old belongings. At 14, he had grown tall and lanky, with the same kind eyes that had first helped the twins begin to trust again. "It looks like Mom and Aunt Eleanor at a beach." He brought over the faded photograph. 2 young women stood laughing in the surf, waves crashing around their knees, hair blowing in the breeze. "Cape Cod," James said, recognizing the location. "Lily's family went there every summer. Our grandmother's family had a cottage there," Eliza said, testing out the connection. Even now, the idea that they had grandparents, aunts, cousins, a whole extended family they'd never known about, sometimes overwhelmed them. Lily and James's parents had been shocked to learn about their long-lost granddaughters. After the initial disbelief, they had embraced the twins wholeheartedly, making up for lost time with frequent visits and video calls. The family resemblance was striking. Eliza had Lily's mother's smile, while Sophia had inherited the same artistic talent that had run through generations of the family. "Time for a break," James announced, standing up from where he'd been helping organize the materials. "Anyone want ice cream?" All 3 children immediately perked up. Some things never changed, James thought with amusement. As they sat around the kitchen island with bowls of ice cream, James marveled at the transformation in the twins. They still had their challenges. Certain triggers could still cause them to withdraw or become anxious. They still preferred to share a room, though they now had separate beds. And they remained fiercely protective of each other in a way that sometimes excluded others. But the haunted look had disappeared from their eyes. They laughed freely now, argued sometimes, rolled their eyes at rules they found unfair, normal kid behaviors that James had once feared they might never feel secure enough to express. "Dad," Sophia began thoughtfully, stirring her ice cream until it became soft, just as she always did. "We've been thinking about something." "Uh-oh," Alex teased, earning a good-natured glare from his cousin. "Go on," James encouraged, curious about the serious note in her voice. "We want to write to Anna," Eliza finished. The twins still did this. Started and completed thoughts for each other as if they shared one mind. James set down his spoon, surprised. "Anna, your stepmother? Why would you want to contact her?" The twins exchanged one of their looks. The silent communication that even years of living as part of a larger family hadn't diminished. "We need to know why," Sophia explained. "Why she erased our real names, our history. Why she made up that story about being our father's new wife when she was actually his sister. We remember more now," Eliza added. "About the time after Dad died. She made us call her Mother, but we knew she wasn't. She took away the photo albums, the letters from America. She made us speak only her language, not the French or English Mom had taught us. It had been like this over the years, memories surfacing gradually as the twins felt safer, their early childhood coming back in pieces. They now remembered living in France and Germany, before settling in the small village near the Ukrainian border. They remembered their father's work as a professor, their mother's paintings that had hung in their various homes, and they remembered the systematic way Anna had tried to erase their past after their parents' deaths, changing their names slightly, moving them to a remote village, creating a fiction that she was their father's widow rather than his half-sister. "I'm not sure writing to Anna is a good idea," James said carefully. "She's serving time for what she did to you and other children. Any contact might be difficult. We don't want to see her," Sophia clarified. "Just write one letter." "To understand." James looked at their determined faces. This was the resilience that had allowed them to survive their ordeal. A steely core beneath their gentle exteriors. Dr. Rivera had always said that healing wasn't Just about feeling safe in the present but making sense of the past. I'll speak to Dr. Rivera about it, he promised. If she thinks it might help you, we'll find a way to make it happen safely. The twins nodded, satisfied for now. That evening, after the children were in bed, James sat in his office looking at his own collection of documents. The story of how the twins had come into his life still amazed him. Eleanor, it turned out, had been a talented linguist who had traveled to Europe after college to study Eastern European languages. There she had met Nikolai Volkov, a literature professor with a passion for translation. Their shared love of language had blossomed into romance, and eventually they had married and welcomed twin daughters. But why had Eleanor cut ties with her American family? This question had haunted James and the twins alike. The answer had come in a box of Eleanor's belongings that Nikolai's former colleagues had preserved after the accident, a box James had managed to locate and have sent to Boston. Among faded photographs and well-thumbed books were a stack of letters Eleanor had written to Lily but never sent. In them, she explained the rift. A misunderstanding, blown out of proportion by pride on both sides, had spiraled into years of silence. By the time Eleanor had wanted to reconnect, shame over the lost years had held her back. The final unsent letter, dated just weeks before Eleanor and Nikolai's fatal accident, expressed her intention to finally reach out, to introduce her daughters to their American family. The girls should know their Aunt Lily, their grandparents, their heritage, Eleanor had written. I've kept them from this part of themselves for too long. She had never had the chance to send it. And after her death, Anna had ensured the connection remained severed, seeing the twins only as assets to be used for her own gain. James often wondered about the chain of circumstances that had led him to find the twins. If he hadn't been researching child welfare organizations for his firm's charity work, if he hadn't clicked on that suspicious link, if he hadn't recognized something familiar in those solemn little faces. The doorbell rang, pulling him from his thoughts. It was late for visitors. Concerned, James went to the door and checked the security camera he'd installed, part of the many precautions he'd put in place after bringing the twins home. A woman stood on the porch, shifting nervously from foot to foot. James didn't recognize her, but something about her stance made him wary. He opened the door partway, keeping the security chain in place. "Can I help you?" he asked. The woman looked up, and James saw that she was younger than he had first thought. Perhaps in her early 20s, with the same dark hair and eyes as the twins. "My name is Katerina Volkova," she said in accented English. "I think you have my cousins." James felt his heart race. Cousins? Sophia and Eliza Volkov. My father was Nikolai Volkov's brother. She pulled out a worn photograph, a family gathering, showing several adults and children, including two small girls who were unmistakably younger versions of the twins. "I've been looking for them since I learned what my Aunt Anna did." After the initial shock, James invited Katerina in, keeping a careful eye on her. He had learned to be cautious when it came to the twins' safety. Over cups of tea at the kitchen table, Katerina explained her story. She had been living in Canada with her mother when her uncle Nikolai and his wife died. They had heard nothing about the twins being sent to live with Anna. "We would have taken them in," Katerina said, distress clear in her voice. "But we didn't know. My mother tried calling, writing, but Anna told everyone the girls had been sent to live with their mother's family in America. We had no reason to doubt her. It was only when news of Anna's arrest had reached them that Katerina had begun to suspect something was wrong. She had spent the last year tracing the twins' path, finally leading her to James's door. "I'm not here to take them away," she assured him, seeing the concern on his face. They're my family, my only connection to my father's side. I wanted to know they were okay." James studied her face, looking for signs of deception, but finding only what seemed like genuine concern. "They're more than okay," he said finally. "They're thriving. They have a home, a family, stability. The adoption was finalized 6 months ago." Relief washed over Katerina's face. "Good. That's good." She hesitated. "Would it be possible to see them? Just to know for myself? Then I can tell my mother they're safe, that they're loved." "They're asleep now," James said. and I'd want to prepare them first. Meeting someone from their past, it could bring up difficult memories. Katerina nodded in understanding. Of course, I can come back tomorrow, or whenever you think is best. I'm staying at a hotel downtown for a week. They exchanged contact, information, and James promised to speak with the twins in the morning. After Katerina left, he sat in the living room for a long time, thinking about this new development. Would meeting their cousin help the twins connect more pieces of their past? Or would it reopen wounds that were finally beginning to heal? The morning. He sat the twins down and gently explained about their visitor. To his surprise, they showed no fear or anxiety at the news. We remember Cousin Kat, Sophia said. She used to visit sometimes. She taught us card games. She had a dog named Spot, Eliza added. But it didn't have any spots. It was all brown. The memories were positive ones, untainted by the trauma that followed their parents' deaths. After some discussion and a call to Dr. Rivera, James arranged for Katerina to come for lunch the following day. The reunion was both heartwarming and bittersweet. The twins were initially shy, hiding behind James when Katerina first arrived. But when she spoke to them in their father's native language, their faces lit up with recognition. "You've both grown so tall," Katerina said, tears in her eyes. "Your father would be so proud of you." James watched as the twins gradually warmed to their cousin, showing her their school projects, telling her about their friends and hobbies. Katerina, in turn, filled in gaps in their knowledge about their father's family, showing them photos she had brought and telling stories of their grandparents and cousins in Ukraine. Alex joined in, curious about this connection to his cousin's past. By afternoon, all four were sitting in the backyard, laughing as Katerina taught them a clapping game she and the twins used to play years ago. "Thank you," Katerina said quietly to James as they watched the children. "Not just for today, but for saving them, for giving them a home when our family failed them." "You didn't fail them," James assured her. Anna's deception fooled everyone. Katerina's visit stretched from one day to several, and by the end of the week, plans had been made for future contact. She would return to Canada but stay in touch via video calls. Perhaps in the summer the twins could visit her and meet their grandmother on their father's side. The day Katerina left, the twins were subdued, but not distraught. The connection had been established, a bridge to yet another part of their complex heritage. "Are you sad?" James asked as they watched her taxi drive away. "A little," Sophia admitted. "But she'll come back, and we'll visit her someday." "It's nice to remember the good parts of before," Eliza added, "not just the scary parts." That evening, as James helped the twins finish their family album, he reflected on how far they had all come. The album now held photos from both sides of the twins' family, Eleanor and Lily as children, Nikolai and his brother in their university days, recent pictures of Alex and the twins at school events and family gatherings. On the final page, Sophia carefully placed a new photo, all of them together with Katerina, taken in the backyard just yesterday. Beneath it, Eliza wrote in her neat handwriting, "Our family, past, present, and future." James felt a lump in his throat as he read the caption. The journey had been so much more complicated than he could have imagined when he first saw those solemn faces online. It had tested him, changed him, broken his heart, and rebuilt it stronger. The twins weren't the frightened, silent children he had brought home 3 years ago. They were growing into confident, compassionate young people with a unique perspective on what it meant to be family. The bond between them remained unbreakable, but they had expanded their circle to include James, Alex, their extended family on both sides, and friends they had made along the way. "All done," Sophia announced, closing the album with satisfaction. "Not really," James said, smiling at their questioning looks. "We'll keep adding to it. This story isn't finished yet." "Because we're still living it?" Eliza asked, always the more philosophical of the two. "Exactly," James replied, putting an arm around each of them. "And I can't wait to see what comes next." As they went upstairs to get ready for bed, Alex lingered behind, looking thoughtfully at the family album. "You know what's weird, Dad? he said. If Mom hadn't gotten sick, if you hadn't started doing charity work to honor her, if you hadn't clicked on that random link, Sophia and Eliza might still be in that village or worse. James nodded, having had the same thought many times. Sometimes I think Mom somehow guided you to them, Alex continued. Like, she knew her nieces needed help and made sure you'd find them. From anyone else, it might have sounded fanciful, but James understood what his son meant. The chain of events that had brought the twins into their lives seemed too perfect to be mere coincidence. Maybe she did, he said softly. Your mom always did know how to bring people together. Later, after checking on all 3 children, Alex absorbed in a book. The twins asleep in their separate beds but with hands stretched toward each other across the space between. James stood at the window, looking out at the night sky. The journey wasn't over. The twins still had healing to do. There would be more difficult conversations, more tears, more therapy sessions working through the trauma of their early years. The legal battle to prosecute Anna fully was ongoing, with the twins possibly needing to testify at some point. And as they grew older, they would face new questions about their complex identity and history. But they would face it all together, as a family that had been formed not just by blood but by choice, by circumstance, and by love that had proven stronger than distance or deception. James thought about how a single decision, clicking on that suspicious link, booking that first flight, had changed all their lives forever. He had gone looking for a way to help anonymous children in need, and had found family he never knew existed. The twins had lost everything, only to find a connection to their mother's past that Anna had tried to erase. And Alex, who had once been an only child still grieving his mother, now had cousins who were more like siblings, expanding his understanding of family and resilience. What had shattered James wasn't just learning that the twins were his nieces by marriage. It was realizing how fragile the connections between people could be, how easily families could be torn apart by misunderstandings, by distance, by the machinations of those with cruel intentions. But he had also discovered how resilient those connections could be, how they could be rebuilt, strengthened, and expanded in ways no one could have predicted. As he turned away from the window, James caught sight of a framed photo on the hallway wall, Lily on their wedding day, her smile radiant, her eyes full of joy and promise. Sometimes he still talked to her, in quiet moments when he needed guidance or simply missed her presence. You would love them so much, he whispered to her image. They have your family's spirit. And though there was no answer but the gentle quiet of a house where children slept peacefully, James felt a sense of completion, of things coming full circle. The story that had begun with loss, Lily's death, Eleanor's estrangement, the twins' orphaning, had transformed into something new. Not an ending, but a continuation, with chapters yet to be written. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new steps in their journey together. But tonight, in this moment of stillness, James was simply grateful for the strange, miraculous path that had brought them all home.